Let's make a directory. Let's call this like a JS. Let's just call it like review. Okay. So let's go ahead, open this up in code. And let's come in here and do a new file. Let's just call this my JS review.js. And then we can have another one, Ruby review.rb. So we have comments. For now, let's even talk about comments. For now, I'm going to say this. I'm going to say over comment your code, like as you are learning.
What's the command for commenting out in large sections of code?
Command \. You highlight it and command \. As you get further in your, like, as you start working on projects, start working on real world projects, you know, comments become, you know, comments really describe why you're doing something. Not what. So, but this is, you know, for now, over comment your code. Later, you're not going to want to comment as much. Let me show you what I mean. I could, like, let's just say I had like an add function. I could like leave a comment right here and like say adding 2 numbers. See, this is describing what I'm doing. So why don't we need though, like describing what we're doing? Why would someone maybe say, hey, why, like this is a bad comment?
If someone's reading your code, the reason they'll be looking at the comments is if they're confused about what you're doing or why you did it.
Yeah. But what does my code say? Like add 1 and 1. That like in it, that's telling me essentially like I'm adding 2 numbers, right? You should be writing your code well enough that your code is describing what it's doing. Right? I'm calling a function right here, add. I would hope add is adding 2 numbers. Like I could call this add numbers. So this comment becomes kind of redundant. Like, and storing. Now, for now, you can overcode, over comment. Like this is for what you're doing. Yes, if you want to do this, like, yes, please. Awesome. I just don't want to like, the reason I'm going over this, I don't want to like, I recommend you do this, you over comment your code. I just don't want to say, you know, down the road, that's what people are going to be expecting. Because, you know, if this was a real project, and you get a little more experience under your belt, I don't need to say adding two numbers and storing to X, because this line of code is saying, hey, add numbers and store to a variable called X. So yeah, over comment, but describe, later you're going to want to describe why you're doing this. And I don't know why you would be like, it's kind of hard to explain why you're doing something if there's not like a more bigger picture. Like, I don't know, X is that's a little hard to like just kind of fake an example when we only have one line of code. Cool. So there's comments. Let me shut my door. Some garbage. Okay. So comments are going to be in every programming language. And I'm just going to stick with just general rule. I really think comments are a great way to learn and kind of reinforce what you're doing. Because at this point, if you can't describe what you're doing, then you don't know what you're doing. Like describing in English what you're doing is a lot easier than describing in code. Okay. There's a little on comments. Let's talk about variables. So what is a variable? Like, how would you define it after like coding for 4 weeks? What would you say a variable is?
Variable, it's what stores it, right? Like you can change it to be what your model's supposed to like represent.
Yeah, I like the word like stored. I think that like storage.
Yeah.
I think a brief, like a kind of what you can kind of describe it as is like named storage of data. That potentially can change. Doesn't have to, because we can have like consts and something that it doesn't change, but it's really, you can think of it as like a box, like where we can like store values in that box. So name storage of data. So in programming languages like JS, we can declare, well, let's just do this. Let's do a console.log. Or let's just say X, just give us a generic variable name. What's going to happen when I run this?
It'll say X. Oh, no, never mind.
Say undefined on it.
I won't say undefined.
Undeclared?
It's yeah, I'm going to get an error. So the undeclared one's probably like, sorry, you said like it's not the fun. So here's the confusing, like we're going to get an error. X is not defined. So let's come and declare X. So I would say this is like declaring, or slash, I could call it defining X. Okay, so this really is like what I was looking, this is going to be an error. X is not defined. There's some weird noise going on there. Okay. What about here? So now I declare X. What is X going to be right here? throw that in strings or just in quotes. X is not defined. Anything? So first of all, is this going to be an error?
No.
Yes.
It'll just be
It'll
undefined.
be undefined.
X is here. X is going to be, it's kind of, it's like this weird wordage. X is undefined. So X is defined here. The value is undefined. It's kind of weird to say that, right? Like right here, X is not defined. I don't have a variable called X. Here I declare a variable called X, or I'm defining a variable called X. But the value is undefined. It does not have a value. So I can come in here and I can have it have a value, X equals 1. So this is what we would call, assignment. We could say assignment, or, assigning a value to X. So what is X here?
1.
Yeah. So let's look at another example. Let's say we have a let y, and then we say y equals and then I do a console.log y. What is y? What is this going to block? What is y?
Just the whole function.
Yeah, this is going
You're
to be,
not calling it.
this is just a function. I'm not calling it, just like X right here is 1, Y right here is just, I'm assigning Y the value of this function. And it's going to be function Y. Like that's the name of the function. Let's throw that right there. And notice also we do not log hello. This one's okay. So what does this one do? First of all, like, what is it going to log, and does it log hello?
It'll say function y hello.
It'll just say hello,
It says hello.
and then maybe undefined.
Undefined.
Yes. Why does it say, why is it going to say undefined?
Because you haven't passed anything to the second parentheses.
That's not quite why. I mean, this function doesn't take any parameters. But it is, I'm like pretty sure it's going to, like 90% sure it's going it's going to return undefined. Why is it going to return, or it might be null? It's either going to return undefined or null. I'm pretty sure it's undefined. Why is calling y going to be undefined? And it's going to log hello.
Is it just because there's only a console log in there? There's nothing else.
Yes, that's getting closer, but this is where I'm saying, like, as we're going through, like, want you to be like very, there's a very right, like clear answer to that. That's getting closer. Like I'm only logging hello. What am I not doing?
We haven't assigned it a value.
You didn't
I mean,
return
I-
anything.
You didn't return, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not, that's the key word. It's not returning anything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this function. It's going to log hello. And once again, like it's thinking about this as like 1 + 1. Like it evaluates. This function is going to evaluate. It's going to run. It's going to, and then like this doesn't return anything. So just by default, it doesn't, it's going to return undefined. Not returning anything. So returns undefined. But it will run the function. It's going to run hello. So we see our hello and then it's undefined. What if I do this? What if I have a let z let's just, z hello. Let's just say y hello. And let's have this return. Same thing with z. What are these? This one's going to be the same, right? It's going to be function. I mean, it's going to say, hey, this is function z. If I don't call the function, but what is this one going to be? Like when I log this, what is it going to log? So do this, the z parentheses. This is like the 1 + 1. Go in your mind, evaluate what this does. What does this do? It calls this function z. What does z do? Z console.log z hello, and it returns 1. Oh, so this calling this function returns 1. So this is 1, right? Does that make sense? So that would be 1. Okay. So continuing on with functions, we have consts. So I can declare a variable. I can call it q. I can give it a value 1, 2, 3, 4. But what's the thing with a const that I can't do?
Change
Can't
it.
change it.
So this is where this gets a little tricky because it's all these little nuances. So what I'm going to say is I can actually change a const. I can't re-const. What I really can't do is I can't reassign a const. So I can't do something like this. I can't say q equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right? If I do that, boom, get an error. So I can change a const. So you might be wondering, like, what the hell is the difference between reassigning and changing? Let's say I have in an array. One, two, three, four. And that's a const. Nums.push 5 console.log nums. I'm going to comment this one out so I don't get that error. So that changed my const, right? I have an array of numbers, and now it's not the same. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But I can't reassign nums because it's a const. There's my error. Is that, I think this, well, any questions on that? Is that confusing? Yay, nay?
I think it's not.
I can just like just like really quick explanation of that. So in like computer memory, like you have, when you're like, here's your computer memory, it's just like a whole bunch of like, just think of them as boxes. It's a very oversimplified version of your computer memory. So we declare a variable, we call it something like X. And you know, if the data type's like a string or a number, we can like we can just throw in that value directly in this box 1. Or you know, like Y, we have a variable, like let's say we do like let X equals 1. Okay. So here's we're just kind of naming this place in memory. We're calling it X, and then we're storing the value in there called, which is 1. But if we do something like within an array, let Y equal, you know, in an array of things, how this kind of works in like, just with memory, like we can't just go and throw like arrays in one memory location. What we do is we store like an address in memory. So it's like just some weird address that then goes and like points to the array. You know, it just kind of keeps track of the, like, there's the values of the array, but our variable Y is just really storing the value. So this is why we can make this a constant. We can change that array because we're not changing this. But the second we say like Y equals a new thing, we're actually like changing this address. And then that's not going to allow us to do that if we declare something a const. So we're kind of destroying this link, and we're like going to like go point that to a whole new different array. It's a little more in depth, but it's kind of just like thinking like these little small differences. These are the kind of things like when you first start to learn to code, they just go right over your head. But now maybe we can dive a little deeper into these. And the other thing, when we're talking about variables and just anything like functions too, it's really important to start thinking about what kind of data stuff is, because on different kinds of data, we can perform different kinds of, operations. So I have a variable called Q. What is Q?
It's just a name, so you know you can recognize it, you can find it.
Yeah, and in this example, like right here, what is Q?
1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah. It's 1,234. It's a number, right? So down here, I can go ahead and do like Q plus 20. What is that? Let's just do something. Let's keep it.
12,154.
Yeah. Because Q is just a number. Like I'm calling this number 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm calling it Q. So this would be 1, 2, 5, 4. What about nums? What is nums?
Array.
An array. And then I could say it's an array of numbers. I call this strings. String of names. What is string of names?
It's just the same value, so it's just an array of 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, it is an array of numbers. What I call it is kind of irrelevant to what it is. And yeah, that would be a bad name. So let's go back to nums. Yeah, this is just an array of numbers. What is nums 0? Math, let's just do, what is this? What's line 50?
That would be nums at 0. So whatever is in the array at 0 plus 2.
Yeah, what is that?
2.
What? Okay, what is?
1?
Yeah, what I'm asking is, what is, like, when JavaScript runs this, it just evaluates that to 2. So that's how JavaScript does like code. It like, so when I'm asking like, what is this? You don't say it's 1 plus 1. You don't say I'm taking a number 1 and adding 1 to it. You say it's 2, right? What is this? But like, what is JavaScript going to evaluate this to?
3?
3.
And it's a num at 0.
3. Don't overthink it. So what's nums at 0? That is 1.
I'm
What-
looking at the wrong
that
array.
that is 3.
I'm looking at the wrong array. That's fine.
Okay, cool. Does that make sense when I'm this concept of like going through and kind of what JavaScript does? It's called like evaluation. We're evaluating a line of code. If I can spell that word right. So this really isn't nums at 0 plus 2. JavaScript's going to evaluate, like it's going to simplify it. We know that in math, that term simplify. JavaScript simplifies everything. So that's really just, you start to read code and you see something like that, and you can like see this array, like you can just treat this as 3. What is this? Like here's the function. Yes, this. I just come down here and I throw a number. What is this?
Or
And
It's 4. What is Z? Like, what does this do? Like, kind of, you just
One.
really need, this is just 1. So there's a, like, JavaScript will actually go evaluate this. It will call Z. Okay, it evaluates that. It does 1. And it moves on. What happens if you just have a number? Like, we can run this. This works. I have this error right here. This doesn't work right there. Just throw it down in here. So this is like syntactically correct JavaScript. So JavaScript is going to start at the top, and you just need to be very, like, when you read code, you kind of read it like JavaScript would read it. Okay, let's declare a variable called X. Okay, let's log that variable X. And then you're going to be like, that is undefined because I never assigned a value. Next line, okay, let's put 1 into that variable called X. Now when I log X, it's now 1. All right, let's define a variable called Y. Let's set that value of Y equal to a function that, logs hello. We're not calling the function. I'm just assigning a value to this variable. So here's my Y. Now I've assigned it a value. Okay, cool. Now I'm declaring a variable called Z, assigning it a value. Okay, here's 1. All right, sweet, 1. Thanks, that's cool. It just sees 1, it goes, okay, cool. That's like simplified. If JavaScript saw 1 plus 1, or 1 plus 1, it would evaluate it and just be like, okay, there's 2. It doesn't do anything with it though. It's like, okay, 1 and 2, sweet, cool. Now we do a console.log Y, and then JavaScript goes, oh yeah, I remember Y because I declared Y. I stored that into a variable called Y. Let's go look at what it is. What is Y? Okay, cool. Y is just this function. All right, awesome. So I'll go ahead and I'll log that for you. There you go. There's your function Y. We go to this line. Oh, you want me to console.log Y? Oh, you want me to call it? Okay, I need to go call this function before I log the value. So JavaScript saying like, I need to now go evaluate this function. It's the same thing if I did console.log 1 plus 1. If I'm JavaScript, I'm going to say console.log 1 plus 1. Oh, I first need to evaluate this, and then I'll log it. It's kind of like order of operations. So I'm JavaScript. I see console.log Y parentheses. Oh, wait, I need to go actually call this function. So let's go back up to my function. Let's go call it. Okay, console.log Y, hello, sweet. Let's log that. Okay, we're done. I'm not going to return anything. So I'm just going to return undefined. Okay, so now I've logged hello, and now I've called Y. Now I can just log undefined because that's what that function returned. Cool. Let's go to the next function. Okay, let's console.log Z. Oh, Z is in my memory. What is Z? Oh, Z is just a function. I'm not going to call it, but there it is. There you go. There's your function Z. Let's console.log Z and then call it. Okay, well, now I need to go call this function Z. All right, let's go run this. Okay, I'm going to do a console.log Z. Hello, let's return 1. Okay, so Z, so this is now returning 1. There you go. There's your 1. Now we can console.log 1. And now I go on line by line, const q equals 1, 2, 3, 4. Cool. So let's store that in memory. I'm not really doing anything with it, but I now am storing this thing called q in memory, and it's a const, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I go to this next line, const nums equals this array of 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, cool. Go put that in memory. Now I go to line 50, nums.push. Oh, now I need to go back to memory and go look at nums. Oh, that's an array. Let's go grab that. I can call the push method because it's an array. Let's push 5 on that. Then console.log nums. Let's go log that. Sweet. Now I go to this nums at 0. Oh, what is nums at 0? Nums 0. That's 1. 1 plus 2 is 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. Like as JavaScript, I go through and I read this, but there's just nothing for me to do with these weird numbers. It's just, okay, 1, sweet, 2, 3, 4, 4, 5. 45. I don't do anything with these numbers. It's kind of just pointless gibberish. And then I console.log done. Like that is when you're like kind of going through code and reading it. That's like what JavaScript is doing. It's going line by line. If we're declaring variables, it's just like storing those into memory. It might not do anything with them. Like I'm storing Q into a variable. I'm storing 1, 2, 3, 4 into this variable called Q. I'm not doing anything with it. I just store it in memory. And I never use this variable, right? This is kind of like a pointless line of code, right? JavaScript will do it. It'll create this variable called Q, but then we never use it. So this would be like, unused. It's kind of bad style. Like, why would I declare, like this doesn't really do anything. Why would I declare a variable and never use it? It's kind of like, why would I just throw 3 right here? JavaScript will run it and be like, okay, 3, cool, 4, cool, 45. Even this, it'll even like do the math. It'll be like, oh, you want me to evaluate 1 plus 2. Okay, that's 3. But those are kind of silly. Does that kind of help to like see like running through code line by line, and like even like if it's one line, learning how to go through and evaluate this. Let's do another function, call it ZZ, and this just returns 3. Let's do X, 3 plus X. Let's do this. Let's do let Y, or let's do, I don't know, foo equal ZZ Z. What is foo? Or actually, let me ask you, more importantly, what is this going to be? How does JavaScript run this? Because now we're kind of getting into like, if we're talking about like just basic math we learned in like junior high. Let's do it times. Let's kind of make this interesting. Kind of the same thing. Let's just keep this simple. Okay, 2 times.
Just doing like an order of operations.
Order
sort of
of
thing.
like there's kind of this concept of order of operations. So let's just do something we know. Like, what is this?
3.
3. But this one is different, right? Even though it's kind of the same numbers, same operations, we do it in different orders, right? So if you were to evaluate this, you're like, oh, wait, I need to start here. And now that's 2, and then 2 times 2 is 4. Okay, so now let's go look at, so that's how you, like, when you do math, you're kind of following these operations, doing things. So when we're running code and now you're like the JavaScript, like, code runner. How does this execute? Like, which part do you do first, do you think?
Will it do the function inside of the parentheses first?
Yeah, we need to do this one first, right? So what is this? Like, what's the, so let's evaluate this function call. What is that?
1.
1. Cool. So that, and let's leave that in a, let's do this in a comment. So yeah, that becomes 1. Then what does that become? What is ZZ of 1?
That's gonna be 4.
Yeah,
Now X is 1.
and that becomes 4. And now, yeah, really that becomes like let foo become 4. Now we've like simplified that enough, right? Where, cool, now in our foo variable, we have 4. So now foo is, what would that be?
5.
Yeah, 5. So that's kind of like, you can get into a line of code. It really just compute. It's all about breaking stuff down. So if you ever get stuck, like if I ever ask you what this is and you're like, I don't know, well, just let's go, break it down, because we could,
Yeah, I think like simplifying stuff and like tracing stuff back to like, especially when you're like exporting and importing functions, like especially yesterday, it was a lot easier for me to understand them when I was like able to like trace them back to their origin and then see what they're doing there. Just simplifying it for myself so I understand it better. I think that helped a lot. And this helps simplify it a lot too.
yeah. So it is just, because I mean, if you were to like look at this and try to just, because math problems can get hard like this. If it's like a, this, I don't know if you're going to be able to do this in your head. But if what you do is you break it down on a piece of paper and you go through the order of operations and you do it kind of like step by step, then it's easy, right? So you might see something a little more complicated in some code. But yeah, you could like break it down. Well, okay, well, this is, just leave it there. Let's see if we get this right. Because really, I'm calling ZZ of Z and Z. So that's really just, that's 1 and 1. That is 2. So then ZZ of 2 is, well, that's now X is going to become 2. So that's 5. ZZ of 3. Well, if I throw in 3, it just adds 3 to it. So that's 6. That is, 1. And then that is 12. Oh, that's 12. But now I'm calling ZZ on 12. Well, that's going to be 15. Do that right. I got an error. Foo has already been declared. Oh, I have it right here twice. And then it doesn't like that. It's just bad syntax, I guess, somewhere. And there's my 15. Like that'd be pretty hard to look at this and just in your head be like, oh, that's 15. But you know, if you break it up, kind of follow the order of operations that JavaScript is following, then it becomes manageable. Does that help make more sense to kind of walk through it like that?
Yeah, that simplifies it a lot.
So let's do something similar with and this is kind of getting into like, I think the nested stuff is you can also chain stuff. So let's say I have let's just use this number arrays. Let's just add, you know, and we don't have to make it like sorted or anything. We can. Okay, so we have an array of numbers. It's got some positives, it's got some negatives, it's got some bigger numbers, it's got some smaller numbers. Doesn't, yeah, really have to be sorted or anything. Okay, I just have an array of numbers. So I can do, like if I do nums dot, how does VS Code know about all of these things? Like why is VS Code to, like what is it really giving me?
Different things you can use
Different things I can use on
for arrays.
arrays. So VS Code, and this is what I'm like, what you really, when you're coding, you know, it's really important when you're working with variables, you know, they have names and the names are descriptive, but you also as the coder, you know what type of data it is. I know nums is an array of numbers, and arrays have functions on them. And even VS Code knows, like VS Code knows this isn't an array. It actually knows it's an array of numbers. See how that says number array? VS Code knows, it's saying, hey, that's a number array. Let me just show you. Let's just like throw in a string here. Nums dot. What is that saying now?
It says it's an array of string or numbers.
Yeah, it's like, hey, there's both strings and numbers in this array. So VS Code does that. You should do that in your head. There's this language called TypeScript, which is a type version of JavaScript, which you have to like, you would need to come in here and be like, yeah, this isn't an array of numbers and strings. But now we're just going to mentally keep track of that. But let's get rid of that string. So I can do a filter method. So let's go through each. Let's do taco. What is taco?
One of the numbers in your array,
It's what?
one of the numbers from your array.
Yeah, it's going to be the parameter. So it's like what I'm doing right here is I'm defining a function, an anonymous function, because filter wants a function. So, and let's just do this. Taco is, you know, greater than 5. So technically what taco is taco is a parameter, because this right here, like this highlighted code, what is this? You don't have to evaluate it. I'm just saying, like, as a whole, what is this? Is it a number? Is it an array? Is it a function? Is it
The
a
function.
Yes, this right here is a function. It doesn't have a name, but it does. This is a function. It has a parameter called taco. And it is a function that checks to see if taco is greater than 5. So I'm kind of assuming taco is going to, and let's just, taco is going to be a number eventually. Let's just define this as a function. Const is greater than 5, and let's name it nice num return num greater than 5. I'm going to kind of just, let's just comment this part out right now and we'll get back to it. I'm just going to, outside of here, I'm JavaScript right now. So I'm declaring a variable called is greater than 5, and I'm setting it equal to a function. This function has a parameter called num. And in this function, it's going to use that parameter num to see if it's greater than 5, and it's going to return this value. Let me ask this, what type of data does this function return? Assuming that number, like assuming, and I'll say this, assuming num is a number. Let's just call this taco.
It will return a number.
It will not return a number.
That's a Boolean.
Yeah,
Maybe true or false.
this will be a Boolean. Now, when I'm defining this, I don't know if it's true or false because I don't know what taco is going to be. I just know taco is going to be a number. I do know this function will return true or false. And look, when I hover over this, the VS Code knows this is going to return a Boolean. Saying taco can be any type. It doesn't like, because VS Code does not know what type this is going to be. It's just any type. And it's not because I call it taco. You know, if I call it number, it's still like, this name doesn't mean anything to VS Code or to us. But VS Code can be like, oh, okay, this function takes a parameter and it's going to return a Boolean. So I'm defining the function, but I don't really ever call it, right? I need to actually call it. Let's just kind of scroll that. Let's say I run just this code. You're the JavaScript compiler. Tell me kind of what happens. You just start right here. We start at the top, right? Just say this is the top of our code. First of all, what do we do with the comments? If you're like,
Ignore them.
yeah, you ignore them. You're just like, okay, those are like, I can't see those, I ignore them. So what am I doing here?
You're declaring a function called is greater than 5.
Cool. Yeah, I'm creating this function, storing it to this variable called is greater than 5. And like, I'm gonna just like pop that away into memory. I'm not using it, I'm just like creating it, putting it into memory to be used later. And then later, so now I come down here, what do I do right here?
Calling the function.
Here I call the functions, and then what would this actually be?
True.
True. Right, so I essentially come in here and do true. Now I have true right here. So I evaluate this, it's true. What do I do with this true?
That's it. It's just true, right?
It's just true. I don't, as a JavaScript, like I evaluate this, I have true. I don't really do anything with this.
Because they haven't given JavaScript anything else yet.
Yeah. So this would be true, but I don't really do anything with that value. I just kind of give it away. This one would be false. Don't do anything with this. Let me just do this in like another sandbox.js. Let's throw this in here just so we can not see any of the other logs or anything. So if I run this, what is this function going, like, what is this little code going to do at like a high level? It kind of does nothing, right? I mean, it goes through, it puts this thing in, like this function into memory. It actually calls the function, evaluates it. But I don't really do anything with these values, like, right? So I might want to do something like let, X, and then I could do like, maybe I could do like a console.log here, checking if, 7 is greater than 5. And then I could do this store is greater than 5 to like a variable. And then I could use this if X, and I could console.log 7 is greater than 5. I mean, this is like, pretty silly, but what I'm actually doing stuff. It's not greater than 5. So here I define the function, and now I'm just going to do like a little log. I'm going to be checking if X7 is greater than 5. I'm going to call my function. I'm going to store that to a value X, and then I'm going to check if, because this function returns true or false, we store that to a variable. I use that variable here, and then I can do an if else statement. And now I can do some actual work. Do I need to like store this to a variable? I could just throw this right here, right? I don't need to store that to a variable. I can. It would work the same. So going back, and I'm gonna like, so going back to our filter. I'm giving my filter, just like I could say my is greater than 5. What does it, when I declare this parameter called taco, I'm expecting it to be a number, right? Because I'm going to compare. When I use the filter function, it's expecting to get past a function. If I give my is greater than 5 and I give this like a string, or I give this like in an array, like that becomes, you don't know what that's going to return, right? That's kind of a little confusing. My filter function wants me to pass it a function. Is there any confusion on that? Like, just it's very basic, but I think it starts to confuse people because this actually is getting a little nested. It's expecting me to pass it a function that has one parameter. Here I'm calling it taco. This parameter I'm passing it, or the function I'm passing it and passing it to one function as a parameter, I'm expecting that parameter as I use it in my function to be a specific, like the type of data that one of these things in my numbers array is going to be. So in this case, my nums array is an array of numbers. So when I pass my filter function, the function with the parameter, I'm expecting to use this parameter like as a number. And that's like this nested. I think this is like a little bit of like nested / inception. Right? Because I could do, well, let's just store this to a variable. Let's call this nums. Well, what should I call this variable? If you want a descriptive name, what would be like a very descriptive name? Of like, what is, once again, I could also ask, you know, going back to the 1 + 1 equation, what is this? And you don't have to be precise. Or I could say like, hey, what is the actual value going to be? Or I could also ask you 1 + 1, what type of data is that going to be? That is going to be a number, right? So what I'm asking you, what is this type of data going to be?
It's gonna be a number.
No.
Array.
Array. I'm also calling this on numbers, which is an array of numbers. So this is going to be and I really want to like, if this is something like, I really do think you really need to be able to do this. It's like you need, like, if if I was trying to like teach you math and I was doing like 1 + 1 and you couldn't tell me that equals 2, or I could ask you, okay, I don't really care about the answer, and I would be like, what kind of data is that going to be? And you couldn't say number. I'd be like, okay, we really need to like get this down. And we use filter, we use map all the time. And this is when, like, you know, you're copying, you're getting this to work. Like for your hackathon, you have to use filter, you have to use map. But if you can't, we really need to like kind of start understanding what these are doing. So it's not copy and pasting, you're actually like, you know how to add two numbers together. So when I come and throw, you know, 2 + 2 at you, it's not that you just memorize that 1 + 1 is 2. You actually know how to do the math, and you can be like 1, 2, 3, 4. And you're like, oh, that's 4. And that's going to be a number. Maybe it's like a really hard math problem. And you're like, oh man, I don't know what that is because those are really big numbers, but I know when I add two numbers together, I'm always going to get a number. So this one might be a little, you might not be able to do the math, but you should be able to say what type of data you're getting back. So first of all, what does filter return? What type of data is filter going to return?
An array.
In an array. So that's the first part. But with this, we could also be a little more explicit. Like, I know nums, and we can just throw this right up by our number array so we can see it. like I know my nums is an array of numbers. So I know this is going to be an array of numbers, right? Like this would be num1, num2. There's also one other thing I could say about just by looking at the function itself. What could I say about the numbers?
Numbers that are greater than 5.
Yeah, all these numbers are going to be, you know, num will be greater than 5. I might not be able to like go through and like say exactly because there's quite a bit of numbers. But by looking at this line, nums.filter, I can at least say I'm going to have an array of numbers. And if I can go in and maybe tell what the function's doing, because this function's just returning true or false, whether the thing is greater than 5. Well, that's what I'm passing to my filter function. I'm passing it a way to like tell it how to keep numbers. And the function I'm giving it is just, hey, check each number and see if it's greater than 5. So I know now that like if I do like let, so the question was, what should I call this variable that's descriptive?
Numbers that are greater than 5.
Yeah, nums greater than 5. Cool. Let's go ahead and get rid of that. I'm going to just throw this in my sandbox just to get this kind of away from everything. Let's just comment this one out. Okay. So then I can now do like a console.log. Greater than 5. And there's my array of numbers greater than 5.
And just to clarify, that filter function doesn't do anything with the original nums function. It makes a new one, a new array, I mean.
Yeah, and that's another good distinction. Like new array. So I can console.log nums here after I do the filter.
And it would still be the same as the original.
Yeah, there's my nums array. So it's
Okay, nice.
unchanged. So I'm going to just call this X for now. So do you see what is it starting to make sense as we're doing like this evaluating? I can now like highlight this thing and look at it and be like, okay, this is an array of numbers greater than 5. I might not know exactly what numbers, but I know this whole thing in blue is an array of numbers greater than 5. So let's now do a map on that, right? Because I can do a map on an array of numbers. So map wants a function, just like filter wants a function. So here's my function. What does map do? You have used map so much, but can you explain what it does?
Maps each thing in an array into its own object.
It goes through each thing in the array, and I think the better word, because like we take an array of objects and usually convert it to an object. I think the word is it takes a thing and it transforms a thing. Like that's really what we're doing with map. We're going through each thing in the array and we're transforming it into something different. So my map function that I give it, I want to, give it something, and then I'm going to give it X, and then I'm going to return something that is like changed, that uses X and changes it somehow. So I could say like, all right, so I'll write this code for you, and then now kind of the same question with when I asked, what is this going to be? And we kind of went through it and we're like, oh, it's going to be an array of numbers greater than 5. What is this going to be? Okay, so we now know this part is going to be an array of numbers greater than 5. And we know map, I give it a function that can go through each thing and transform it. It changes it into something different. So let's call this like, what is this? Any ideas?
On what the return is going to be?
Yeah, if I did like a console.log, we could do it right there. And this I'm asking, like, if I were to say like, what is 1 + 1? Like the answer I'm looking for is like, I want you to tell me what the data structure is going to be. You don't have to tell me the exact value.
Numbers greater than 5 that are equal to 0.
It's still going to be an array.
Yes.
And
It's gonna give
it's
you a
gonna be-
Boolean.
Yeah. So it's going to be mapped over all of your filtered ones. And then it's going to say the number after num, and then is odd, true, or false.
So it's going to be an array. What, like, these were numbers. What's the type of data my array is going to be?
An array of objects.
An array of objects. What are the objects going to look like?
The first key is going to be num, and the value will be the number greater. Well, it'll start at something greater than 5.
Yes. This will be a number.
Yeah.
Right?
And then the second key will be a Boolean.
Is odd. And that will
Is
be
odd.
Second will be is odd, and the value will be a Boolean. Yes.
a Boolean.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have an array of these objects. And yeah, I heard you say this. I could also even make the assumption that number value will be greater than 5. So let's go through and log that. Did we log it? I don't think I saved it. Sandbox, am I running? Oh, there it is. What is this? So there's my array of objects with the num and is odd key. And notice none of the nums are greater than 5. Does the
Greater than 5. None of them are less than 5.
yeah, sorry. All of them are greater than 5. So let's say I go the other way. What I mean by this, I'm gonna come down here. What is this 2? And let's just say I switch the order of this. So I do nums dot map. And then I do my dot filter on that. That going to work? Kind of just, I called that taco. Here I called it N. what's the difference here? Like the order does matter, right? So when we're talking about like the order of operations and kind of like this chaining or nested stuff, how is JavaScript going to evaluate this first? Well, it's going to see nums.map. Okay, so it's going to do this part first. Well, we saw that this is going to return, something that looks like this, right? But what's different about our numbers now if we do the map first? Or like this data right here. Like numbers are not going to be greater than 5, right? So there's that thing. Because we're not filtering them first. Is this filter function going to work now? That's the other question. And the answer is no. And the reason I want you to think, why is this not going to work now?
Because it's not filtering out from the numbers array, right? It's filtering from the map. Is that why?
Yeah, that's
It's going to be saying true or false, so it can't say if it's greater than 5.
so as I'm using n right here, I mean, I could call it taco. Like what kind of data, like this is just a function, right? I'm given a function, give it a parameter m, is n greater or equal to 5?
Because it's already
It's-
being converted to object, right? So it can't.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm giving my filter a function where like it's kind of expecting n to be a number, but I'm now calling it on this thing I just mapped over, which is now going to be an array of objects with the num key, which is a number, and this is odd, which is a Boolean. So
So it's like trying to go through those objects and then see if that whole object is greater than 5.
Yeah.
Right.
So
It'll
what?
just give an empty array, won't it? Because there's nothing that's a number greater than 5.
I mean, yeah, I don't know, like, because it's going to compare, like, because when I call it, this is going to be the n, and so I don't know if that's going to be an error or what that's going to be. Let's go ahead and log it.
Because like instead of it being just a number, now it's that entire object.
Yeah.
It's like that doesn't really, you can't really compare that, see if that's greater.
It's so what it's why so it's going to be an empty array because it's just going to return, I guess, for all of these. I don't know, I guess. And I guess an object is not greater than a number or equal to. It's just returning false.
Yeah.
It doesn't really make
That's
sense to compare an object to a number. So how would I make this work? Kind of like essentially what do I need to change?
You'd have to get that num value, that x, right? Or just put it in front of the map like you had before.
So let's do it this. So remember, like, because I'm kind of doing this multi-line let's do this in 2 lines. Let's just go like let num objects equal this first part. It's console.log num objects. Just to kind of show you, like, this is, I'm I'm gonna just ignore that for now. Node.js review, I need to save that. Oh wait, no, I want to do the node sandbox.
You do it like looking for the index instead, like the index value.
There's it's pretty
I
simple.
guess that
There's just one thing we need to change. It's really straightforward. It's really simple, the thing we need to change. So let's break it up. I think once again, I think it's when you're like, it's the same thing when you're learning math and like, you know, you're starting to use like variables and like PEDMAs and you know, that kind of stuff. It's sometimes it's really just breaking it up into like the simple parts. So let's just do what I'm doing now is I'm just breaking this up into just the first map. And let's just really see what this nums object is, right? The nums object is an array of objects that have a num key and an is-odd key. So if I take this, I can call the filter method on it, right? Because that's just this array of objects. And then I need to pass it. I want to pass it a function. Okay, let's just even.
can you use that num key?
Yeah, yeah, that's what we're going to do. Let me just say like, I'm writing some function. I'm going to call this is num key value greater than 5. It's going to take like this object. This is going to take like a num object, and a num object looks like this. Bum object, num object. So how kind of shake out clear your memory. I just want to like write a function that goes in and looks at like an object that has a num key. And I want this function to return true or false if the num key is greater than 5. Go. How do I do that? Anyone? This is can't get much simpler than this.
Did you use
I
map?
mean, just like is num greater or equal or greater than 5?
Yeah. But okay, so this function is expecting this. It doesn't know, you know, this is going to be a number. It doesn't know the value. It just knows it's getting a num key, which is going to be a number, and an is odd, which is going to be an object. So I want to see if the num key is greater than 5. Do I care about this is odd thing?
No.
No, but I'm kind of still expecting that to be there. I'm not going to use that in the function. What I really care about is this key. How would I just log? So how would I call this function? Like, what should I pass? So here I'm defining my function, and here I want to call it. I want to
Give it the num object.
num2 is odd. Right? Is num key value, I don't even need this. Yeah, is num key value greater than 5? Here's 2 ways I could call that. So how, first of all, like, let's just log the number. How would I log the number? Because if I run this,
It wouldn't be num object at 0, would it?
it would not.
Num object. I can't remember how to pull the first piece out of an object.
It's not, with objects, they're not ordered. It's all about the name of the key.
Oh, okay.
So console.log.
Num object.num.
Yeah.
That's right. Okay.
2 and 7. Cool. So I'm logging my numbers.
So then you can use an if statement.
Oh,
I can just say, you know, is that greater than 5? That's logging that, right?
Mhm.
now you can pass it the
So I could do it,
array
yeah.
of objects.
So I could do it in, well, I want this function to return true or false if the thing is greater than 5. So this function I want to return true if it's greater, false, else.
I guess how you had it would also work too, so it doesn't need to be an if statement.
How I had it.
Yeah, didn't you have like a return num object dot num greater?
I was console.logging it.
Oh, okay.
Console.log. See, this is actually running the function and it's actually, you know, it's evaluating this. If I wanted to see the actual result, I could store this into a variable so I could log it. Or I could just wrap that into console.log, but let's just log them. X1, X2, false and true. So now this is number key greater than 5. I can pass it that object that has a num key, which is 2. You know, it's going to get past this is odd. I don't really do anything with that in the function, but that's kind of what I'm expecting this num object to be. Because what if I pass it something like this? What is X3 going to be?
It's going to be yes, because all you're
Still gonna
asking
be
the function
true,
to
right?
do is return it if it's greater, or like return true or false if it's greater than 5. The fact that the object is wrong or that
This is a good question. This is a good interview
It
question.
doesn't matter if what number.
it doesn't matter what the
It
is
doesn't
object
matter what that says.
Let's
Right.
take a break. I want you to think this is kind of like combining a whole bunch of concepts we learned. Don't run this code. Don't cheat. I mean, you can go run this, but I'm going to select this out. Let's take a break. What time is it? Really? Have we been really going that long? I'm so confused with the time. Is it 11:20?
is.
Yeah, let's take a break. I didn't realize it was that long. Let's come back. I'll give you let's give you 13. Actually, I'll give you a little longer. Let's go to 10 or 11:35 since we kind of went long. Come back at 11:35, take a break. But I also want you to look at this. Ask yourself very, very hard what X3 is going to be without running this. And then if you do run it and you see the answer, then if you get really stumped, run it and then ask yourself, why is it the value it is? Cool. So
Yeah.
come back 11:35 and we'll go over this.
Sounds good.